Welcome to the 48th. I'm Frank Camacho.
I'm Kurt Davis.
And there's lots to talk about, Kurt.
There is, Frank.
Yeah, let's head down south to CD2. Recount between Barber and McSally.
Yeah, obviously demonstrates how every vote actually really does matter. But I think the results won't change from that recount. So I think we're going to be looking at Congresswoman McSally.
In a campaign like this, what usually do people do? I mean, it's so close. I think the last tally was something like 133 votes, and like you say, I mean, indications are it's not going to change that much, even with the recount. I mean, do you go through a lot of soul searching right now? What do we do right? What do we do wrong?
I don't think there's any worse position to be in as a candidate. I actually feel really sorry for Congressman Barber because you're going to sit up for years wondering if I had found 161, I think is the difference, 162 more people. What didn't we do? I'd rather lose by a lot, quite frankly, than lose by 160 votes.
It's like baseball. I mean, if you get beat 10-0 or 1-0, you know, you still get beat. So
Right.
what the heck? Then traveling up here, there's rumblings already of a recall against Diane Douglas. What's your take on that?
It's outrageous. The law requires a person be in office for 6 months before you launch a recall, and you have to demonstrate what the causes are. You have to list the causes. She hasn't made a single decision yet. So this is just politics at its worst.
Yeah, some would argue she hasn't done anything yet. I mean, not
she
even
hasn't.
campaign.
She hasn't been sworn in. So it's just politics at its worst, and it should be viewed as such.
What do you think the PR clash would be, the fallout, if they went ahead with this?
Well, they're going to end up actually driving her name ID up, and they're going to give her a bigger platform. If you don't like Diane Douglas, don't give her a bigger platform, and that's all these people are going to do. It's clearly, you know, extremists that, quite frankly, don't know what.
Extremists?
Yeah.
No, I don't think they're extremists. I mean, they're
extremists to be
folks.
talking about a recall right now.
Yeah.
That's just ridiculous behavior, and it's laughable. I mean, it really is laughable. She may give them reasons to try to achieve a recall. Wait till that happens.
But do you see why people would be frustrated enough to even talk about something like that? I mean, I don't think a recall is the right thing to do either. But I can understand the frustration, though, and the angst that people have
Frank,
with their election.
Actually, if you look at what Andrew Morell said, the head of the teachers union,
right.
The AEA, he said exactly the right thing, which is she wasn't the candidate that we chose, but we will attempt to work with her, and we'll see what happens. That's being a statesman. That's being what you should do. Elections have consequences. Winners get to govern, so you attempt to work with them. Let the disagreements occur at the policy table and then at the next election. But this nonsense that we're going to start a recall right now, I mean, again, they're extremists that are making fools of themselves.
Whoa. Those are pretty strong words. I mean, they just would have the freedom of speech. I mean, can't you just talk about it?
And unfortunately, there's the freedom to be a fool as well. So.
kind of reminds you of the Evan Meekum days, doesn't it?
Yeah, they launched a recall against him before he was sworn in. However, he gave them, chose to give them reasons to credibilize a recall over time. We don't know if Diane Douglas does that or not.
Okay. Let's, and going back to the election and all, Chad Campbell, who is the outgoing House Minority Leader, leader of the Democrats in the State House, came out this week with a very, some would call it very scathing autopsy of the election result. He basically said the Democratic Party in Arizona is dead.
Well, you know, kudos to him for pointing, and maybe the language will be viewed by some Democrats as a little bit over the top, but kudos for him to face the facts of what happened. And the facts that happened was it was a bad cycle for the Democrat Party. So the question is, who picks up the pieces? Who looks to rebuild what has been a great history of a Democrat Party in Arizona, and prepare them for the next election cycle? And I think he's positioning himself to be that person.
Do you think he will run for chairman?
I think he might. And you know, Chad's an honorable warrior. And I could see Chad being a good advocate for Democrat policies and but understands the basic things you need in a political party, which is the ability to block and tackle, get your votes out, get people to cast votes for your
candidates. Well, that's
candidates.
the key, isn't it? That the fact that the Democratic Party right now, and I think most Democrats would agree, didn't have a real great ground game.
Right. The hard part for Chad will be that he's going to have to live, if he becomes chairman, 2 more years of Barack Obama. And Barack Obama is not going to be an able
You had
recruiter.
to bring it in there, didn't you? You have to mention.
He is damaging the Democrat Party. I mean, the bottom line is he's damaging the party.
Okay, let me ask you this. Is he as bad for the Democrats as George Bush was for the Republicans?
I think he's actually, he's raised hurting his party to a higher level.
How so?
Well, we're going to see probably in 2 weeks, he's going to be going solo on an immigration reform, or as I call a 10-point amnesty plan.
There you go.
And it's going to be
reform.
devastating to the Democrat Party. It will be devastating to his presidency, and it will end virtually all communication between him and his and the Congress.
And to that, I would say, what communication?
Well, he's the chief executive. He could reach out. He could take a page out of Bill Clinton's book and start behaving like a president. But what I think we're going to see is he's going to continue to behave like a monarch. And when he does that, he's going to lose. And his presidency will die if he does this. He will be done as president, effectually.
And do you think the Democratic Party will be done?
He will hurt them. Democrat Party has survived lots of things.
By the way, Craig, it's the Democratic Party.
Last time I checked, it says Democrat.
Arizona Democrat. My paycheck used to say Arizona Democratic Party.
It's just hard for a Republican to say.
I understand that. I had to get that in there. But it seems like is there a way, if the president doesn't do it, though, what are Latinos going to do? Are Latinos going to leave the Democratic Party or in droves if he doesn't do something on immigration reform?
No, and I think you know that there's a widely, whenever I hear this, the Latino community has Republicans, it has Democrats, it has independents. They're not a monolithic group of people that agree with everything a president does or disagree with everything a president does. And I think on this issue, they will break along many different lines.
Unfortunately, for you guys, that the Democrats, even if Latinos are angry at Democrats, Republicans haven't done much to court them as well.
There's an opportunity with the new Congress to do so.
They haven't shown any indication, no reason
You
for
have
optimism.
to prove it in the pudding. And
Exactly.
I think that there's an opportunity for them to do so.
Lots more to talk about, and we'll continue our discussion when we come back. Stay with us. And welcome back to the 48th. Our guest this evening is Dr. Sam Foote, who was one of the first to raise the question and the alarm at the Veterans Administration Hospital here in Phoenix. Dr. Foote, thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for
We
having me on.
appreciate you
Thank
being here. There was some movement this past week where some changes were announced at the VA hospital in Phoenix. What do you think of those changes?
I'm not sure which ones in particular that you're referring to. The Secretary did address kind of what I think was a little tease about 35 possible firings followed by another 1,000. But I'm not sure that they're really serious about all that, and I think that just may have been an action to buy some time.
Is that really going after solving the problem? I mean, what is the major problem in your estimation?
The major problem in the United States, of which the VA is in, is there's a huge mismatch between the demand for primary care providers and the number of providers that there are to provide it. And the VA has gotten way behind the curve on this. And so now, as he said, he wants 28,000 more providers, and you've got a situation where the peak of supply is here and the demand is rocketing up, and the supply is only going to fall while the demand goes up. So the ability for the VA to try to catch up in that kind of a market where they're competing against the private sector for the resources is going to be extremely difficult.
How long have the problems of the VA really been going on, though? We're talking about a systemic issue.
Seriously, for about the last 4 years. It's, you know, we were doing okay here in Phoenix until summer of 2010, when our director got into some financial trouble and had done a little bit of diversion of funds and couldn't go to the director for help, and he let 4 primary care providers go without replacing them, and then it was 7. And then we had 7,000 patients uncovered. And by the time Hellman came in February of 2012, we were still at 7,000. By December of that year, we were somewhere between 10 and 13,000 in the hole. And with a year backlog for new patients, and rather than address it, they chose to hide it. So they had us clear out the ones that were on the books and the computer, and then started all the shenanigans to hide the demand.
So why is Sharon Hellman still there?
What an excellent question. There's a lot of speculation on that. The secretary, I don't think he's been fully candid with the people about this, saying that he was talking about how all 1,000 of these people would have to go before an administrative judge. That's never been the VA's policy. I was there 23 years, and when they fired people, and probably one of the most recent senior executive service people was Susan Bowers at the Vision. They basically say to you, here's what we have. We think this is grounds to fire you. You have 30 days to appeal it or resign in lieu of it. And most people choose to resign. And if they choose to appeal it, you risk your retirement. And after 30 days, you're off the payroll. And now you're having to, come back and fight and appeal this on your own, not being paid. This is the first time I've ever seen somebody who did what I think is more than enough grounds to be fired, not be terminated for cause.
What would you have liked to have seen? I mean, if you could, if we put you in charge of the VA right now, what's the first thing you would do to really address the problems and more importantly, save the lives or provide treatment to the veterans?
Well, that's 2 separate issues, really. As far as veterans treatment goes, the VA has been treating providers poorly for the last several years, not appreciating the fact that this is a scarce resource, because it didn't really matter to them. If you're in the private sector and these people leave and you can't replace them, you're going to lose revenue and you're out of business. But the VA doesn't work that way. Your salary doesn't depend on what I generate if you're an administrator. Whereas in private practice, if you're an administrator of a clinic, you have to balance the books. The VA doesn't. And so they did not have an incentive to provide better care, and they turned towards hiding things to get a financial incentive.
So the customary way of the government doing business, and from my perspective. So the question I have for you is, why have a VA at all? Haven't we matured enough as a nation that when our vets come home from their service and we're going to provide them benefits, why can't we give them the ability to go get their own services where they choose to get them?
Well, Kaiser downsized the VA in the 1990s, and they started closing hospital beds, and the idea was they would be down to 3.5 million veterans by about 2005. And all the moves were made. They downsized the system. They were working on it. And then the bureaucrats in Washington said, oh my God, if they get down to 3.5 million veterans, they're going to give everybody a Medicare card. We're all going to be out of work. And so they opened the floodgates up, and they wanted to have 5 million veterans by that time. They ended up with 7 million. Then that was late 90s to early 2000, maybe 2001. Then a couple years later, the war starts. Now we've got more veterans coming. Then 2007, 2008, the economy tanks. Every time that happens, more come. So now we've got anywhere from 9 to almost 10 million veterans in a system that was downsized to accept 3.5.
So what do? Bring the system back up to its original levels?
Well, I wrote an op-ed piece for the New York Times a couple days before Memorial Day, and basically I said the VA needs to decide what its mission is. It either has to downsize and decide who are they going to take care of. Traditionally, that's been service-connected veterans for their service-connected conditions and a safety net for the poorest veterans. I think in also you should include anybody who's actually been in combat, because they have so many more problems that come up later.
Wouldn't it be cheaper if we honored every vet service by simply providing them the ability through a voucher, through reimbursement, however the mechanism you want to use, for them to choose to go where they'd like to go to get their health care. Be a lot cheaper than funding that giant bureaucracy that has failed our veterans.
It would not be cheaper. It might be better and more convenient. The VA, in terms of providing basic care, blood pressure management, diabetes, outpatient type of care, it's much cheaper in the VA system because you don't have the markup, you don't have the profit taken to some part. Running hospitals is much more difficult because of in Phoenix here, not everybody does it. If you're a burn unit, you go to Maricopa. If you need, if you need a bone marrow transplant, you're going to be up at Scottsdale Shea.
Correct.
Okay, these are special centers. So, but for providing basic care, but the other issue you have politically is you have veterans make up a third of the VA's workforce. So you're going to be putting veterans out of jobs if you close medical centers. But I think the VA really needs to think back what it needs to do. And I think it probably should go more towards outpatient, doing the basics, what they do good, taking care of homeless, PTSD, and basic services, and leave the hospitalization and more specialty things to the private sector.
Okay. We'll be right back continuing this conversation with Dr. Sam Foote. Stay with us.
I'm Fareed from Mesa. I would like to know if the VA will ever recover from this scandal.
Doctor, it's a good question.
That's a very difficult and complex question, and I don't think it's possible for the VA to recover without help from the private sector. They cannot build enough hospitals, and by the time they build them, they won't need them. And so the problem that they have is they have a bulge in the system right now, and they have to decide how they're going to deal with that. And they mobilized here to triage many thousand patients that had been waiting, but they still have a mismatch here at the Phoenix VA and nationwide between the number of primary cares that physicians and providers that they have versus what the demand is. And as far as I know, here in Phoenix, they have not made any net gains. They always like to tell you, well, we've hired 300 or 400 new people. Well, how many of those people are doctors or providers, and how many of those people left? So what's the net gain? And they will never tell you what the net gain is.
Well, unfortunately, from my viewpoint, the federal government has always demonstrated an inability to regulate and monitor itself, and not just in this issue, but in lots of issues. At the end of the day, that going back to the question, this is a significant break in trust with people that served our nation. How would you go about reestablishing that trust? Because I think it's maybe permanently broken.
Well, there's a couple things. The first thing is you want to get care for the people who need it. And I think with the $16.3 billion and some of the vouchers and some of the rapid triage, there's been some help there, and certainly in Phoenix. But that's a temporary measure, and we're talking about how to fix the system long term. But again, there is a mismatch between the demand for care and the VA's ability to provide it, as there is really across the nation. And I think that probably the best move is for them to re-examine what they're doing, and they need to most likely downsize their efforts. And perhaps what they need to do is offer veteran subsidies for getting group insurance. And so if they paid, let's say if you were a veteran and you could go pick whatever plan you wanted, and the VA would pay half of it, or something like that, as acknowledgement of service. And for those that were injured and 100% service connected, the VA would either have to, should either take care of them or provide 100% subsidy for their outside service.
When since you've come out with your criticism, made your criticism public and all, has the VA listened to your suggestions at all? Or are you the persona non grata? They don't want anything to do with
They've
you?
come out and attacked me, and they sent the IG report to try to make it to discredit me, and we know that the IG's not independent, that went all the way up with the email train. So no, they haven't much listened to what I've said.
What about Congress?
Congress very much has, yes.
Okay, are you optimistic that perhaps that dialogue will, in some way, some of your ideas will be incorporated in the fix, whatever that fix may
Well, one of
look like?
my first ideas, the Medicare card, John McCain embraced as the choice card, and the idea that if you live too far away or if it's too long out, so that certainly went well. And I think I was talking to Representative Schweikert, happens to be my representative when I was back in Congress defending myself at the hearing about what was going on, and he was listening very carefully to what I had to say.
On a personal, I wanted to follow up because a lot of times we read these stories and we see the statistics. You're not just a statistic; you're a person. What's happened to your life since you were willing to stand up?
Well, this wasn't the way I wanted to retire. I wanted to retire in May of 2015 when I was 62, and I basically got forced out. And I realized that I didn't have any choice but to leave because what I had to do I could not do as an employee. And I was first when Secretary McDonald talked about how they were going to take care of whistleblowers and they were very important to the organization, I bought it. I will agree to that. And then seeing what happened, I had to go defend myself on my own nickel. Congress did not pay for me to go testify. If you're not an employee, you have to go. And they changed the hearing a couple days before, and it cost me another chunk of change to change flights and try to get a room because of the Ukrainian prime minister or president was coming to town to speak. And if that report had been honest, it would have said, not only did we find 40 patients who died while waiting from the 2 lists Dr. Foote was looking at, we found 83. And if the report had been honest, it would have said there were 293 patients who died in Phoenix while waiting for care.
Should there be criminal prosecution?
I don't know about criminal prosecution. I think if you're looking at destruction of evidence or obstruction of justice, I think that you need to look hard at that. For VA employees who were given the decision, either you do this or you're fired, and some people elected to get fired, I really don't think it's fair to hold them to that kind of a criminal standard. The people who ordered it, perhaps.
10 seconds left. Would you do it all over again?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Sam Foote, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for your courage. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
We'll be right back. Welcome back, and our old buddy Kurt here's been busy lately, and going to get busier.
Yeah, I'm just volunteering, serving on a transition for who will be our next guest next week.
Exactly.
Incoming Attorney General Mark Brnovich.
Real quick, have you had your first meeting yet?
We've had our first meeting. He's obviously got a lot ahead of him, and he's going to have to build a team and all that, and it'll be interesting to ask him about that.
It'll be interesting. That'll be our program next week. Please be with us back then. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Frank.
Okay, bye-bye.